In the last 3 episodes of The Atomic Bomb, we examined how the Hiroshima bomb was made and how it worked, and how things easily could have turned out very different, how the mission to Hiroshima could have been a massive failure. In this episode, we're going to switch our perspective to the Japanese side to explore the question, what did the Japanese know? Were they caught completely off guard when Hiroshima was destroyed by a fantastically powerful bomb? Or did they have an inkling that something massive, something terrible, was coming? Stay tuned. Before we get going, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you like this kind of content. And smack that thumbs up button. Throw me a like. Thanks. By the summer of 1944, the tide of the Pacific War had turned fully against the Japanese. They were falling back on all fronts. A key setback was the loss of the Mariana Islands, in particular the islands of Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, between June and August of 44. These 3 islands, with airfields that the Americans greatly expanded, put U.S. bombers within range of the Japanese homeland. Starting in November, these bombers began to methodically pound Japan, destroying its industrial capacity and burning its cities to the ground. With so much destruction now coming from the Marianas, the hundreds of B-29 bombers that were based there became a particular focus of the Japanese High Command. Starting in the spring of 1945, the radio communications of these B-29s were closely monitored by a special intelligence unit in Tokyo, with a staff of more than 100 people. It was headquartered here, in a fortress-like building in a walled compound in Suginami-ku, atop a small hill. It was a top-secret outfit, under the direct command of the Japanese Imperial Army's General Staff Office. So, what were these radio communications the Japanese were monitoring? They were mostly Morse code messages that were being passed between B-29s and their home bases. These messages were all sent in code, a secret code that the Japanese never broke, so they couldn't understand what was actually being said. One part of each message, however, wasn't encoded. It was sent in the clear. That was the call sign, the identifier that came at the start of each message. By monitoring and analyzing these seemingly innocuous call signs, the Special Intelligence Unit was able to extract a considerable amount of information. What the Japanese learned was this. All B-29s used call signs consisting of the letter V followed by a 3-digit number identifying where the plane was based. B-29s based on the island of Saipan used call signs in the V-400 range, V-401, V-402, V-403, and so on. B-29s based on Guam used call signs in the V-500 range. And B-29s based on Tinian had call signs in the V-700 range, V-701, V-702, and so on. After figuring this out, Japanese intelligence was able to know when a bombing raid was coming and where it was coming from simply by intercepting radio transmissions containing certain call signs. If a flood of radio chatter was intercepted with V-500 call signs, for example, it meant that B-29s were taking off from Guam, that a bombing raid from Guam was on its way. By counting the number of active call signs, the Japanese could determine how many planes were in the air, and in turn how big the raid was likely going to be. And by triangulating the radio transmissions as they approached Japan, the Japanese were able to determine the course of the planes and in turn their likely target, whether it was going to be Tokyo or Osaka that was going to get hit, or perhaps someplace on Kyushu. This gave the Japanese significant prior warning of a coming raid, the ability to issue air raid alerts well before the bombers ever showed up. Okay, so now we come to the atomic bomb. Here's the story. In June 1945, the Special Intelligence Unit in Tokyo began picking up new B-29 call signs from the Marianas, call signs they had never encountered before, in the V-600 range. There weren't many of them, perhaps only 12 or 13 planes. They were based on Tinian, evidently some sort of special unit operating alongside the island's more familiar squadrons with V-700 range call signs. Lieutenant Hasegawa Roji, who served in this Special Intelligence Unit, would recall the discovery for a documentary that aired on NHK television in 2011. We'd seen 400s, 500s, and 700s, and they came from Saipan, Guam, and Tinian. But now, V-600s. Something was wrong, we thought. Because these V-600 bombers were so few in number, the intelligence unit called them special task planes, assuming that they were intended for some special purpose. Hints of what that special purpose was began to be received in late July, when V-600 planes started flying missions to Japan. These raids consisted of just 8 or 10 aircraft, not the hundreds of bombers that flattened whole cities. And each plane dropped just a single bomb. A single, very large bomb. These special task planes on Tinian, with their V-600 call signs, they were, of course, the 509th Composite Group under Colonel Paul Tibbets. The 509th arrived on Tinian in June 1945, after completing stateside training at Wendover, Utah. As part of their final training, they flew so-called pumpkin bomb missions to Japan, a series of dress rehearsals for the actual atomic bomb missions. These pumpkin bombs, so named because they were painted orange, were identical to the plutonium bomb that would destroy Nagasaki. Same size, same weight, but non-nuclear. They were packed only with high explosive. 4 of these missions were flown in the closing days of July, on the 20th, the 23rd, the 26th, and the 29th, each plane striking a specific assigned target. After the 4th mission on July 29th, they stopped. The Special Intelligence Unit in Tokyo monitored all this. The single bombs being dropped by the V-600 special task planes did not cause much damage, almost nothing in comparison to the full-scale B-29 raids, but their behavior was deeply ominous. Major Hori Eizo, the unit officer in charge of providing intelligence to the General Staff Office, passed this information up the chain of command, but little notice was taken. The embattled Japanese army had other things to worry about. More than a week passed after the last mission to Japan by the special task planes. Then, in the early hours of August 6th, V-600 radio chatter once again heated up. It began with 3 special task planes taking off from Tinian and turning north toward Japan. They were followed an hour later by 4 more V-600 bombers, following the same course. One of the planes in this second group landed at Iwo Jima. The remaining 3 planes continued on. The first group, meanwhile, was now splitting up as it neared southern Japan. One plane headed to Kokura, the second to Hiroshima, the third to Nagasaki. Each plane sent out a shortwave transmission when they reached their assigned target, but dropped no bombs. The Special Intelligence Unit in Tokyo interpreted this behavior to mean that they were reconnaissance planes reporting back weather conditions. This was correct. These 3 advanced B-29s were in fact jab at 3 over Kokura, straight flush over Hiroshima, and full house over Nagasaki. The question that remained was, why were they reporting on the weather? What were the 3 B-29s that were following them intending to do? The 3 advanced special task planes turned back south for Tinian after sending their radio transmissions. The second group of 3 B-29s continued, on target now, for Hiroshima. An hour later, at 8:15 local time, a blinding flash of light heralded the destruction of the city. The news, when it reached Tokyo, confirmed the worst fears of the Special Intelligence Unit. The purpose of the Special Task Planes was to deliver a new and terrible weapon. 2 days later, on August 8th, an officer from the General Staff Office visited the Special Intelligence Unit for an award ceremony recognizing the unit's good work in identifying the call sign of the B-29 that had dropped the atomic bomb. Tanaka Kunio, a captain in the unit, recalls the officer saying, "If the same planes come again, we will stop them. We will pursue and destroy them." The very next day, in the early hours of August 9th, the Special Intelligence Unit picked up renewed V-600 radio traffic from Tinian. The Special Task Planes were coming again. 2 planes in the lead this time, followed an hour later by a group of 3. Ota Arao, a lieutenant in the unit, recalls sitting at his desk that night, listening to the Morse code signals coming through his headphones. "I felt fear. I thought there was a high probability that within a few hours an atomic bomb would be dropped somewhere in Japan." Major Hori immediately passed this information on to the General Staff Office, but no warning was issued and no action was taken. The 2 B-29s in the lead proceeded to Kokura and Nagasaki, circled, then turned back. They were weather planes, just like before. Visibility over Kokura must have been better, because the second group of 3 planes proceeded there first. They circled over the city for 50 minutes, then gave up and proceeded to Nagasaki. The flash of light signaling the end came at 11:02 in the morning. Nagasaki, like Hiroshima before it, was destroyed as Lieutenant Ota and his comrades at the Special Intelligence Unit listened in. In the next episode of The Atomic Bomb, we're going to investigate Japan's efforts in World War II to build an atomic bomb of its own. That's right, Japan had its own Manhattan Project. And I'm going to tell you all about it. Stay tuned.